There seems to be something fishy going on at Hornady. Hi everyone, Ron Spomer with Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. And we've got some serious questions about Hornady Ammunition Manufacturing Company. This is a comment from one of our viewers who says there seems to be something fishy going on at Hornady with the 7PRC cartridge. Look at the ballistic data for the precision hunter ammo from Hornady with their 175 grain ELDX bullet. They claim 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle, and with the high BC bullet, that generates amazing ballistic that trounces the 7 Remington Magnum. But look at all the reviews on YouTube for that ammo, and no one is getting 3,000 feet per second. Most are getting around 2,800. That gives its ballistics much closer to the 7 Rem Mag and the 6.8 Western, and they would love to squash that one. So people are buying the 7PRC because of those published ballistics, which appear to be inaccurate. Seems a little suspect. Well, indeed, we have dived deeply into this, including shooting the ammunition and 2 other kinds of ammunition in one rifle, and going straight to the horse's mouth. And we are going to have an interview with someone from Hornady and pull in our own information that we garnered on the range to answer this question. But first, we need to talk about one of the comments from our patron. This is Matt, and Matt and I have been going back and forth about all sorts of things, and he wrote, "This is a totally different subject, but I noticed something recently. All the cartridges that we have, 24s, 25s, 26s, 27s, 28s, and 30s, well, we skipped a number. Why are there no cartridges that shoot a 29 caliber bullet? I can't even find one. Is it just that there is no need for one? Well, that's never stopped us before." So I wrote back, Writer John Barsneth and I discussed this some 25 years ago. That led to the creation of the 29 BS Wildcat cartridge. And that stands for Barnes and Spomer, not Bull S. John wrote that up as an April Fool's joke article in Rifle Magazine, but I can't recall if he ever actually built a rifle to chamber it. There was a 7.35 Italian Carcano cartridge in World War II that used a .298-inch diameter bullet, so that qualifies as a 29 caliber. But it's kind of silly. I mean, how thinly can we slice this pie? Why not a 28.5 caliber or a 6.25 millimeter caliber? Or, well, we could just as effectively run with, say, a 22, 25, 28, 31, 34, 37. Alter your bullet's length and weight to achieve the BCs you want and the mass you think you need, and the targets and the game will never know what's missing. And I did a little more research, and there's one more cartridge out there. It's the, what was it? Swiss Rubin 7.5 Swiss Rubin cartridge, which used a .299-inch diameter bullet. So that was probably a 29 caliber. So there you go, Matt. Matt wrote back and said, obviously I have to get a rifle chambered in 29 BS. Thanks for the information. I always have fun with our patrons. Now, before we get to the real details on that 7PRC, let's hear from some of our other commenters and viewers. This is someone from the Adirondacks of New York. I don't see a name. Here it is, Zach. Ron, love your work. You're my go-to resource for guns, ammo, or cartridges. Keep up the great work. Well, thanks so much for that, Zachary, and I will do that. I recently wrote in and I inquired about good compact rifle cartridge combinations, and I'd like to refine that question. From your experience, what is a combo that will give me the best value or performance in a compact setup? I'm a guy of shorter stature, so I enjoy shorter length of pulls on easy carrying guns in the mountains with shorter barrels. I'm planning my first hunt out west, and I ideally would like a gun to dedicate to that type of hunting. I will be hunting antelope, mule deer, and hopefully elk someday. Right now, my thoughts are 7mm 08 or a 6.5 PRC in a 20-inch barrel to take advantage of the long, high BC bullets. I've considered the 7PRC and the 280 AI in 22-inch barrels as well. I ideally want something lower recoiling or for more accurate shots, and I don't plan on running a suppressor. Well, at least not yet, but I hope to someday. So I don't plan on shooting past 400 yards, but I like the extra margin and accuracy some of these well-designed cartridges offer. I'd love to hear your thoughts or advice. All the best, Zach. Whew, boy, that's a lot of stuff. Now, you're considering it very well, Zach, but this barrel length issue is getting to be really a stickler for a lot of folks. You know, it used to be in the old days, 22-inch barrels for 30-06 length cartridges till you got into the magnums. Now, some guys would say, oh, no. With a 30-06, you really should be using a 24-inch barrel. Same with the 270 or the 280. And there's good reasoning behind that because a couple more inches of barrel length gives you a little more velocity. And if you want to maximize the performance of any cartridge, why not maximize its velocity? Well, the problem is you can go to a 30-inch barrel and you still probably have not maximized your muzzle velocities. So you have to strike a balance between what is usable, easy to carry, maneuverable in the woods, and all that sort of thing. You get your barrel too long, and even if you're in open country, it tends to be a little bit too muzzle heavy and wants to tip. So you've got to strike a balance. But boy, you know, the 22 and 24-inch options really are pretty close to ideal. Now, I will and have take, say, a 7-rem mag or 300 Win mag, and instead of a 24-inch barrel, go with a 22. I have never found that either one of those gives me much of a problem unless I'm doing a lot of hiking, walking in the woods with it slung. The rifle slung, the barrel sticks up, and you're hitting tree limbs. That's most common. I've been in some cliffy country where riding along on a horse, for instance, and the overhanging cliff hits the barrel, but that's pretty rare. So I think we overdo it a little bit on this length until we start sticking on muzzle brakes and silencers. A muzzle brake is usually a couple inches more. And then you're looking at 5 to 7 inch, mostly 6 to 8 inch range on those suppressors. So that starts to get you pretty far out there. The nice thing about a suppressor, of course, is you can take it off. So if you think you're going to be hunting where you want a shorter barrel, take it off and you've got a shorter barrel. But you cut that barrel back to 20 inches and you're starting to impact your velocity quite a bit. Now we can compensate for that by knowing our drops and drifts. You're going to get a little more deflection from your winds. You're going to get a little more drop. But as long as you know what that drop is and you have plenty of energy in that bullet anyway, you can compensate, okay? How much do you want to compensate? This is where it gets yin and yang here. You know, we want these magnums, we want top velocities, we want big, long, heavy bullets for the high BC numbers and such, but then we compromise everything with that shorter barrel. So I guess each of us has to decide how much of a compromise we are willing to make. I know my friend Joseph Von Benedict is really liking those 20-inch barrels with a 5 to 6 inch suppressor out front. He just thinks it's worth it, sacrificing the velocity for the comfort of not having that muzzle blast. And boy, I'm sure with him on that. I'm not quite ready to give up the performance I've come to love from those longer barrels, and I will use my earplugs to compensate. But boy, there are a lot of times I'm out there and I go, there's a quick shooting opportunity and I don't have time to put in the earplugs, so I have to defer. Am I going to pass up that shot to protect my hearing? Or am I going to take the shot and risk damaging my hearing even farther? And I'm already wearing hearing aids in a lot of situations. You just don't want to be pounding your ears all the time. So you've got to make these decisions for yourself. I really can't tell you how to do it. Other than this, the shorter your cartridge and the less the powder volume, the more you can get away with chopping a little barrel off. You start getting your big, long magnums burning 100 grains of powder and more, and you need that barrel length to get your reasonable velocity. Otherwise, why even mess around with that big magnum? You might as well go with a lighter cartridge to start with. And I think your 708 and a 6.5 PRC are pretty reasonable for a 20-inch barrel. So you might want to do some investigating on that. Go to that 7PRC and the 280 Ackley Improved, and I think you do want to stick with at least a 22-inch barrel, if not a 24. But again, regardless, if you are willing to sacrifice that muzzle velocity and the ballistic performance for the convenience of the hearing protection and using it in tighter cover, I think it's worth going for. I mean, it's your life, it's your rifle, it's your hunt. You get to make these decisions for yourself. So good luck with it. My advice is just that. I really can't decide for you, but any of those are going to work out to 400 yards. 400 yards is really not all that far a shot ballistically. It's still a big challenge for us as shooters to read the wind, especially at those distances, and get a steady field position. This is where most of your problem comes in with these long-range shots. And the guys who are starting long range at, say, 800 yards and then going out, I just don't think that applies to hunting. We just shouldn't be taking those kinds of shots at games. So that's what I would recommend, is inside of 400, you're going to do just fine. All right. This gentleman from Missouri, Tyler, is asking about a 6.5 by 284, a cartridge about which I was really quite excited about, 15 years ago? What is your opinion on the 6.5 by 284 Norma versus the new 7mm PRC for long-range hunting on mid-sized game? Well, I'll tell you, before the 7PRC came along, I would have compared it to the 7 mag and said, I think your 6.5 284 is a great option because it gives you a short action length if you get it with a good enough magazine box to handle it. But you start shooting these really long high BC bullets and you might not have enough magazine room in there. The 6.5 284 was the 284 Winchester, our first short fat case way back in the 1960s that just really didn't go too far because they weren't putting it in the right rifles at the time. But the 6.5 is simply that thing neck down to 6.5 and taking advantage of the high BC bullets. And boy, it was it was really a treat to shoot that thing. But now it's kind of been superseded by the 6.5 PRC, which does the same thing, maybe a little bit more velocity. And I think you're going to find there's more ammo available in the PRC version of it. Whether you should pick that over the 7 depends on how much bullet weight you really want to be throwing. Yeah, a lot of guys think, boy, for elk and moose, I want 175 grain bullet, something pretty heavy. You're not going to get that in a 6.5. But for deer up to elk, I think the 140 to 156-ish grain bullets in that 6.5 are going to do just fine. But you're going to find it a lot easier to get those in the PRC version of the 6.5 rather than the 284. I think our 6.5 284 is probably going to slide off into oblivion. So I would recommend the 7 unless you really value that short action. The 7 PRC is going to fit in a 30-06 length action. We mostly call that a standard length action. The 308 short action, that's going to fit your 6.5 PRC. All right, now we're going to go with Corey, and he is in Ohio. And he's been doing research on the 7mm PRC, and he wants to know what I think about it. He says, I've read some of your articles on it, but I want more specific answers. A, I love the idea that it's a long-distance target round and a hunting round. If I plan to use it mainly for long distance, but I want a chance to hunt with it, what should be my maximum weight without optics? Maximum rifle weight, gosh, Corey, it's up to you. I like minimal weight because recoil doesn't really bother me. And I like my hunting rifles to weigh closer to a total of 6 pounds, maybe 7 at max, whereas most people are starting with a 7-pound rifle and maxing out at 8 to 8.5 pounds. But if you can tolerate the recoil and you have the right stock shape and all the rest of it to help with some of that, lighter is always easier to carry in the field, and I have found that my super lightweight rifles are plenty accurate a lot. A lot of guys will say they're just too light and you wiggle around too much. Well, how many of us stand up and wiggle around when we shoot anyway? We're almost always getting prone or sitting at least and using bipods and backpacks and all kinds of support anyway. It's just not the good old days when Grandpa used to stand on his hind legs, as we said, and take his shots at 200 yards offhand. So I don't think you should freak out too much about that. So I think it's going to come down to what you prefer for carry weight and convenience versus tolerating the recoil. All right, what's your next one? B, can this rifle ethically take large brown bear and moose, or does it cap out on elk? No, the 7PRC is plenty enough for the big bears and stuff as long as you use the right bullet and put it in the right place. As our good friend Phil Shoemaker, the Bear Guide, has demonstrated as well as said, you can get by with a 9mm handgun taking a big brown bear. And that was a self-protection kind of a situation, but it just proves that the right bullet in the right place can do the job. Or in Phil's case, the several right bullets in the right place. I think he put 4 of them into the chest of that deer, that big bear, at about 12 paces. But he said that as far as he can see, his clients have taken bear just as effectively with 270s using 150 grain bullets as they have with the big magnums. And he has used a lot of 30-06s, and he used to carry a 35 Whalen around and a lot of different things. So, no, plenty of bears and elk and moose have been taken with 7mm. Just use the right bullet and one of the heavier ones. I think you'll do fine. Okay, C. What firearm should I consider, taking into account your answer from before? I currently have a 6.5 Creedmoor that I love, but it sounds like this round in the right rifle might be too versatile to pass up, meaning the 7 in the right rifle might be too versatile to pass up. So, yeah, I think you're right. The 6.5 Creedmoor is a big step down from the 7. I think if you're running a 6.5 Creedmoor for deer and pronghorn, coyotes, the lightweight stuff, great, you've got that covered. Now you need to step up and a little more energy downrange on target for the bigger stuff. I think that 7PRC is a great option. So I think you're going to do fine there. All right, good old South Dakota, Damon. My buddy and I are looking for a practical all-around rifle for whitetail, western for mule deer, and western states elk. I was explaining to my friend and debating between the 6.8 Western and the 7PRC. And under the hood, the 7PRC surely has a slight advantage, but the 6.8 is a much more practical option. It's a short magnum, chambered in the classic Model 70 and the Browning X-Bolt, lighter rifle, less recoil. The 7PRC rifles seem to be big, heavy, long-range model rifles packing a larger punch. Am I right in thinking the 6.8 is a perfect blend of a modern cartridge chambered in a practical and classic style rifle? What's your take? Boy, my take is that I think you've got it figured out, Damon. I have noticed, too, that most of the 7s are put in more of a semi-target rifle, you know, the long-range target shooters. I think that's what they were aiming for when they created this thing. The 7PRC wasn't made so much to be a bigger, faster, harder-hitting hunting cartridge. The 28 Nosler covers that, and the 7 Rum covers that, and the old STW. And the 7 Mag has been doing it since 1962. So I don't think Hornady was trying to compete with that. What they were trying to make was the precision cartridge. So they're looking for maximum accuracy with these high BC, long, heavy bullets. And I think that's what they've developed with this cartridge. So as far as hunting convenience, I think you're thinking right. What's the rifle going to feel like? Surely you can get a 7PRC built in a hunting format stock and rifle of reasonable weight, even lightweight, really, because it's just a standard length action. It's not a super magnum length action. So you could do that, but it seems like most manufacturers are rolling out these platforms that are a little more geared towards the precision shooting and the target shooting stuff. So either one's going to work for you, but yes, I do agree that if you want it in a classic style hunting rifle, I think you're going to find that 6.8 is right there. And as a lot of guys have been saying now on this complaint about this PRC and the 7PRC being a little slower than advertised, they say, boy, that puts it right there with the 6.8 Western, given the bullet's weight in the 6.8 Western versus the 7PRC. Well, if you're not getting that full 3,000 feet per second with the PRC 7, your 6.8 Western is going to be equaling it in downrange performance, if not even bettering it sometimes. So this has changed the paradigm a little bit here. A lot of guys are now thinking, maybe I'm just going to go with that 6.8 Western, and it's not a bad option. So I think you can be all right with that. So good luck with whichever you choose. And let's hear from one of your fellow South Dakotans named Nick. Ron, I'm considering getting a new rifle. I'm curious if you think it's worth the money. Well, of course it's worth the money. They're all worth the money if you have the money. I have a bolt action Ruger 300 Win Mag. It's probably 20 years old. It's just a youngster. I'm considering getting a 7PRC or a 300 PRC. I want to use it for elk and deer primarily. Is it worth the money in your opinion? Well, once again, if you've got the money, it's always worth the money. But if money is tight, I really don't think you're going to get a huge advantage over the old 300 Win Mag. That 300 Winchester Magnum has been performing around the world for decades. Since 1964, it's known as a world beater because it is. It's a lot like the 7 Rem Mag. Both of those have just kind of optimized the combination of bullet weight, reasonable recoil, reasonable weight rifle, and all the bullet you really need for taking just about everything. So, bingo, all you're doing really with these PRC cartridges is increasing the potential accuracy, the precision, tighter chambers, tighter throats. Everything's optimized for those longer high BC bullets. So it just makes it a lot easier to buy the rifle and then the factory ammo and be rolling. With the olders, the 300 Win Mag, you might have to tweak it a little bit, play around to get it to work just as well. But gosh, over the years, I've shot so many different 300 Win Mags and taken deer and elk and pronghorn and just all sorts of things with them, including a lot of African game. And I didn't quibble too much about whether I was getting a 1/4-inch group out of them. I'm hunting. And pretty much everything I shot at fell over because it's just the great all-around hunting cartridge it's always been. So I would say if that 300 Win Mag group's well enough for you and you like shooting it and carrying it and everything else, you don't need a 7 or a 300. But I also understand the need to get a new rifle. And I'll support you on that. Were I doing it, I would go with the 7PRC. I think the 300 is pretty close to the 300 Win Mag already, and both of those are really more than you need for most of what we hunt, especially deer. If you're starting to say, I'm mostly hunting elk and kudu and eland and moose and bears, okay, go for the 300, but I really don't think those animals are going to know the difference. Right bullet in the right place. So many of my listeners know that. I repeat it. They repeat it. The guides repeat it. It's really what it's all about. Hey, Knives of Alaska, one of our sponsors, and we really appreciate it. And they have a great collection of knives, of which you've probably never seen one that looks like this. What the? It's the old round nose? A round nosed knife? Well, they've got some words on the side of the blade here that will help explain it. The muskrat. The muskrat? Well, back in the day, we used to utilize nature's largesse in the form of muskrat pelts. Muskrat is a rodent like most rats. It's quite prolific. And when the water conditions are just right in a place like the pothole wetlands country of the Dakotas up into Canada, muskrats can go from almost extinct to swarming in the matter of a season or two when the water levels are right. And you can trap those muskrats, shoot those muskrats, and use the fur, beautiful fur on those animals, until the water goes down, and then they all die off. And it didn't matter how many you took. They always bounce back when they've got good habitat, and that's water. And when I was a kid, we got some high water years when the muskrats went crazy, and I made a lot of money trapping muskrats, paid for a lot of my college education. And when you skin a muskrat, you don't want to poke a hole in it, thus the round end on this sweet little knife from Knives of Alaska. And this will work for skinning anything. If you're skinning out, let's say you went tree squirrel hunting for dinner. You want to skin that squirrel out, you could use this knife. Or a rabbit, if you don't use the pull technique. Or any small animal. This is just a great option for not poking holes in the hide as you skin. So if you're looking for a light, straight-handled, full tang, good rubberized grips on this scale, it's a good option to even have a lanyard hole in here so you can put a lanyard around your wrist. And while you're working, you want to just drop your knife and then pull. You can pick up your knife without losing it. Great little system. The muskrat from Knives of Alaska. Okay, let's see. Here's someone from Wisconsin. Jace. Hey, Ron, I love your videos and podcast. You're a class act. Well, thank you for that, Jace. I live in Wisconsin driftless region where any shot at a whitetail over 300 yards is essentially unheard of. However, someday I do want to go out west and elk hunt. Right now I'm shooting my grandfather's 6mm Remington. I love that little round. I love the gun, but I want something that'll put a bigger hole in the deer. Do you think it would be wise to get a 308 for deer hunting in Wisconsin, where I'm not taking shots very long? And then someday when I go out west, should I buy something like a 7PRC? Or do you think it'd be wiser to get the 30-06 that I could use for both? But I would have a higher recoil for my Wisconsin deer hunting, and I wouldn't shoot quite as flat and as long out west. Oh my gosh, decisions. I'm just curious, what do you think would be the wiser option? I'm currently looking at getting either the 308 or a 30-06 in the Browning AB3 Hunter rifle, and I'm curious what your recommendation would be given my situation. Help! Cheers from Wisconsin. Boy, Jace, you're like the rest of us. Should I or shouldn't I? Which one's better? On and on it goes. Keep doing your research. Of those three, the 308, the 30-06, and the 7PRC, were I looking to have all the advantages of the latest and greatest, I'd have to go with the PRC. Why? Because of what I've just said. It's just designed from the get-go for precision shooting. Now, it's a little tougher to get it in those convenient hunting rifles, so you might want to consider that and look pretty hard. But if you went with a 30-06 instead, you're not going to be very far out of the ballpark. You're not going to naturally get the same precision accuracy out of every store-bought rifle and box of ammo. We've proven that recently in our 30-06 week tests. We just were not getting really great performance out of any of them. And I think it was a combination of general purpose hunting rifles not being put together for precision shooting, and then ammunition being not put together with match grade precision in mind. And you end up with good hunting performance, but not stellar accuracy. I've shot plenty of 30-06s that were tuned up with hand loads that got sub-MOA accuracy. But it just seemed like you don't get that over the counter very much. It's more of an also-ran cartridge. Still has all the potential it's always had, though. Great bullet selection, more than enough horsepower, reasonable recoil, and all the rest of it. And then you get your 308 arguers who say, well, that's only 100 feet per second behind a 30-06, so what's the big deal? And I can agree with that too. So I think you'd be fine with any of them. But ultimately, if you really want to stretch it out there and do the most precision shooting at longer ranges and have the best high CBC bullets and all the rest, 7PRC, if it does what they claim it should do rather than what so many are claiming it doesn't do. And we're soon going to get to the answers on that one. Okay, what else do we have here? Twists. PRC again, covered that. Barrel length, we pretty much covered it. This is Rex from Arkansas asking about a Socko long action, 264 Win, or create a 7PRC out of it. Yeah, it's an option. He wonders if he should stick with his 264 Win mag or a 280 AI or create something new like the 7PRC. I think I would probably skip out on that 264 Win mag because it's sliding into the grave, unless you are one of us kind of people who like something unusual and likes some of the old stuff and wants to work with it and use the modern powders and bullets and see what you can do with it. A lot of fun there, but gosh, it's just easier these days to pick up a PRC, the 6.5 PRC, and do about the same thing, or one of the, like the 6.5, if you really want to go, 6.5 300 Weatherby, or the 6.5 RPM. There's a lot of options out there now, so yeah, I could see working with that either way. But yes, once again, that 7PRC just shows a lot of potential for easily getting into the latest and greatest in a cartridge that covers the waterfront, as we've often said. Now, that 284 Winchester you're contemplating, one of my favorite cartridges of all time, you'd better be a hand loader. They just don't make ammunition for it. It's probably sliding into obsolescence too, especially with all the new short, fat 7mm out there. But boy, I sure love it. So yeah, you're going to have to make up your own mind on that one. But for a lightweight mountain rifle, the 280 AI might be the way to go. That or the 284, or get it in a 7 SAUM or one of the other short 7s these days. Either way, you're going to have to work at it a little bit. Now we're getting back to the big question. What is going on with pulling the wool over our eyes on this 7mm PRC? They said it's supposed to go 3,000 feet per second with not only the 175 grain hunting bullet, but the 180 grain match bullet. What is actually going on? Let's have Mr. Gomar ask us a question. Hey, Ron, I appreciate your contributions, but you only read from advertised figures given by the sellers of the ammunition. I could never duplicate that 3,000 feet per second out of my 7PRC in a 24-inch barrel. Please confirm the advertised bullet speed before you make this video. Otherwise, it's all BS, and I don't think he means Barnes and Spomer's 29 caliber. Next guy is Gemetic. Ron, will you do an actual velocity check with these two cartridges with real-world numbers? Those numbers you use are Hornady's advertised numbers, which are proving to be much slower than what they claimed. There are more and more videos proving as much when using the required 24-inch barrel. They're getting 2,800 feet per second instead of 3,000. I'd love to see what these two actually get at the range, then compare the energy and drop. Whew. Okay, so that takes us back to our initial question from Elk Hunter, who asked about this. Is it real that you're supposed to get 3,000 feet per second? I got some numbers, gentlemen and ladies. I've been to the range. I've been shooting a whole bunch of 7PRC again. I shot it when it first came out. Actually, it was just getting announced. And I got some of the first ammunition for it and some of the first rifles chambered for it and shot it a lot. And I did get 3,000 feet per second at that time. But this is now. That was then. Fresh information coming up. But first, we've got a treat for you. I wanted to go straight to the horse's mouth, so I called Seth at Hornady, and we're going to play the interview with him right now, and you're going to figure out what's going on with this Hornady 7PRC, and then we'll get back to my test data. Hey, Seth, are you there?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Ron.
Great. Yeah, say we're investigating the controversy currently about the PRC not maybe going as fast as it was advertised to go. And I told folks I was going to reach out to you. Thanks for taking my email and agreeing to meet me here. So Absolutely. You know the story, I think, better than I do. But the basic idea is folks are not getting the advertised velocity on this PRC. So they're complaining about it, and I just thought we would dive in and find out what actually is going on. Now, I have got quite a few boxes of 7PRC ammo here, some of it as old as 2 years ago, just about the time you introduced it, and I am getting advertised velocities or awfully close to it. But I don't think I've picked up a new box of ammo that might reflect what some folks are seeing. So kind of fill us in here. What exactly is going on when these folks are saying I'm getting 100 to 200 feet per second less velocity?
Sure. Well, it's definitely concerning as a consumer because you'd want to know about that. The beautiful thing is we're at a point in the industry where chronographs are so reliable, so convenient. You got the new Garmin Zero out there, the Lab Radar before that, the old shoot through the screens method are gone. So you have more people getting good velocity. And so that's a positive takeaway. So to look at this, we really have, it's multifaceted as most things are. But there are a lot of reasons you'll get different than printed muzzle velocity. And we'll get into some of the easier, like the low-hanging fruit. And then there is some complexity within the last few months that's really added just another layer to not Hornady, but the industry as a whole, the ammunition industry as a whole, because there are some things that are becoming increasingly more difficult to obtain, and that has affected the ammunition. And the ammo industry's been in situations like this before, but between nitrocellulose being hard to come by or harder to come by for the propellant manufacturers and the war in the Ukraine chewing up a lot of those high-performance propellants, it's really, we're in a tough spot, again, as an industry, not just at Hornady. So the first thing, the printed muzzle velocity is printed from a 24-inch or whatever the SAMI length. This is 7PRC, it's 24-inch, but in any cartridge, it's the SAMI length test barrel, and it's not just the length that is specific. A SAMI test barrel is cut to minimum tolerances for bore and groove dimensions, throat geometry, all of the chamber dimensions. Those reamers that are used to cut those barrels are qualified to the 10th of a thousandth that they are absolute SAMI min spec. And so, Ron, as you know, just the interaction of ammo with those critical dimensions can change the pressure and therefore change your velocity. So it's not just the barrel length, but it's also the rifling configuration, 5R, 4-groove, 6-groove, etc. The cross-sectional area, how wide your lands and grooves are, how deep they are, how much they're engraving the bullet. So all of that comes into play. Then it's compounded by the throat geometry, the diameter around the bullet in the free bore, the forcing cone, and then even in the chamber. All of those dimensions in a SAAMI test barrel are held to SAAMI minimum standard. So that velocity as printed is obtained from those conditions. So regardless of propellants or anything like that, it is very common to see discrepancies on a huge scale, right? Sometimes it's very little, sometimes it's quite a bit, based on your firearm. And again, all of those minimum spec tolerances could be the exact opposite in your rifle, maximum spec. So now it's not achieving the same pressure, therefore not achieving the same velocity. So that's one reason.
Have you seen this in other cartridges over the years? I certainly have. I remember years ago I had a 270 that, according to the recipes and everything else, should have been doing 3,000 feet per second with a 130 grain bullet. And I was getting 2,700 feet per second. That to me was shocking. It was in my early days where I was figuring this stuff out. Mm-hmm. Is that fairly common?
It is common. I'd say 300 feet per second is that's a huge, huge discrepancy just based on, the dimensional tolerances we're talking about. The worst I've seen is in a 300 Win Mag. 300 Win Mags are notorious for having very loose SAAMI tolerances. You can have an in-spec chamber that is sloppy. In the world of, machinists, it would be grossly oversized, right? And so the worst I've ever seen is with the 300 Win Mag, and it wasn't 300 foot, but it was half that for sure. It was every bit of 150 foot per second. Just when there's a product called SeroSafe. If you SeroSafe the chamber and cast it, you can measure throat diameter, jump to the rifle, you can measure all of that. And it was in spec, but
far edge.
Yeah, on the far edge. So that's one thing. Now, regarding high performance propellants, like I mentioned, I'm going to briefly talk about the development of the 7PRC, and that'll help me answer the second part of the question. So when we designed the 7PRC, we looked at other 7mm Magnum options. Obviously, you have the 7mm Remington Magnum, but the bigger overbore, the 28 nozzler, the 7 STW, people wanted us to do a 300 PRC straight necked down. And when you look at propellants, there are certain characteristics that we want in a propellant. We want ignition characteristics. We want great, easy ignition, even in cold weather. We want very consistent pressure. We want pressure generation that's very consistent regardless of the temperature. We want velocity performance regardless of the temperature. And we want all of those things to be accurate. Well, what I just described stops in burn speed right around Retumbo. You get much slower burning than Retumbo or maybe Reloader 26, and you now are in an area where you have trade-offs. They're Retumbo, Reloader 26, there's a few others, but you get all of those attributes. But you get slower than that, US 869, Reloader 33, stuff like that. You have trade-offs in temperature stability, ignition performance, general accuracy. Mm-hmm. So if we made the case as big as a 300 PRC or as big as a 28 nozzler and then made it 7mm, we would be optimally building the case for a propellant burn speed that doesn't exist. We want all four of those attributes. So the reason we selected the length of that case, 2.28 inches, is because it makes it perfect for a full house load of Retumbo, Reloader 26, Vidivorian 570, even Reloader 23 and classic H4831 do really, really well. So that's what it was designed around. And at the time, all of those aforementioned propellants, we had pounds on pounds on pounds of them. Storage containers.
Not so much anymore.
So the performance was easy to get. It was obtainable. It was awesome. And recently, between there's probably more aspects to this than I'm aware of, but I'm just a marketeer now, so I'm not in this world of propellant and grand, world scale economics. But I know nitrocellulose has been a concern, and nitrocellulose is one of the chief components of gunpowder. Yeah. And so low quantities and increased cost and lower supply of nitrocellulose has made it harder to get certain propellants. All propellants, the cost has gone up dramatically on all propellants. And then you throw in the compounding factor of the war in the Ukraine. And a lot of those high performance propellants that we love to use come out of Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Norway area. And then like Rotumbo, that comes out of Australia. And so we're at a point where those propellants, not going to happen. They're just not here.
You can't get them, huh?
You can't get them in enough volume to satisfy the volume of ammo. So we went through a pretty exhaustive search for a propellant that would meet all of our criteria. And then a fifth criteria, which is it had to be available in huge volumes. So that created kind of a sticky widget where we weren't willing to sacrifice accuracy. And we'd much rather have accuracy than velocity. And so we found some propellants that were readily available that made pressure, made velocity, easy to ignite. Everything was good, but they, on the average, shot very poorly. And so we weren't willing to sacrifice accuracy. And so we found a really good powder alternate, a temporary powder alternate that is readily available. We can get it in the volumes that we need, produces fantastic accuracy, meters well, temperature stable. And we found that alternate, and most of the time it meets the pressure velocity specs that we've originally specified for the ammo. However, there are some lots that we receive from the manufacturer that come up short on velocity when you run them up to pressure. And we're still not willing to sacrifice our accuracy standards for velocity. Because again, we could very easily throw in a propellant that would be as fast as you want it to be, probably faster than the spec, but it would be very inconsistent at cold and hot temperatures, and it wouldn't be very accurate on the average. You'd have a lot of trade-off there. And so that was a tough call to make. But somebody had to make that call because the fact of the matter is, make that call or don't load ammunition. And that's a tough one. And again, I mentioned this at the beginning, but this is something that has plagued in just the last few months here, the ammunition industry as a whole, not just Hornady. It's something that is going to have to be navigated by all ammo companies moving forward. Hopefully things get better. Hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel isn't a freight train. The ammo industry has weathered many storms, certainly over the years, between propellants and lead and copper prices and all these things. So I'm confident it will go back to normal. But unfortunately right now, that is the state of the industry.
Have you seen those reductions in velocity and or accuracy or anything else with other cartridges because of the same cause? The powders you just can't optimize anymore, can't get them. What do you do with a 300 mag or a 300 PRC or a 6.5 PRC or 6.8 Western or anything that anybody's loading for? Do they all have to make these compromises?
Most will. However, a lot of the cartridges that you mentioned live in a space where they're not under as much scrutiny. There's a lot of people that would buy, say, a 300 Win Mag off the shelf hunting rifle, and their expectations of performance are different than when you buy a race car type of cartridge, like the PRCs, or you mentioned the 6.8 Western, or any of those modern designs. So although those are likely occurring, I don't think they're being noticed, or they're not severe enough to notice. Or like I said, it's just the expectations are different for those cartridges.
Yeah, I could see that. But what I'm hearing a lot of from my viewers and listeners is that, gosh, this PRC is overrated and they're cheating us. My 7 Rem and Mag does better than that. And I was thinking, well, wait a minute. 7 Rem Mag, let's look up some numbers on that. Pushing 175 grain bullet, I looked at Federal Winchester, HSM, Fiocchi, Browning, Nosler, Remington, Cellier, and below, and we're getting velocities peaking with these 175 grain bullets under 2,900 feet per second. I think the fastest one I found was an advertised 2860 for a 175 grain bullet. And the PRC, you guys are advertising it in the hand loading manual. You've got it at maxed out at 3,000 feet per second with a 180 grain bullet. I think it's 3150.
3050
or 3,050 with the 175.
Yep. Just a handful of propellants do make that performance, and it's an honest performance. They do achieve that.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit of trouble understanding the grousing, but then I'll hear from the hand loaders who say, well, everybody knows that the 7 mag is a map is too low at 61,000, I think it is.
59.
But when the rest of the belted magnums are going at 65,000, so why not push it up? So they'll do that as hand loaders. I don't recommend it. But then they look at the top end, and you're looking at maybe 2,970 feet per second out of a Nosler manual for a 175 grain bullet on the hand loads. That was the fastest I could find on hand loads at safe levels.
Sure. So
I think that's kind of the world we're playing in with some of these folks are really upset with it. But as I understand that 7PRC, you didn't make it as a entrance in a horse race. Because the 28 Nosler beats it, the 7 Rum beats it, the STW beats it. You were trying to make a precision cartridge that optimized more things than velocity, right?
That's exactly right, Ron. And that's definitely the perspective to look at it through is we could have made it go fast. And, referencing those 175 grain loads with the 7mm Remington Magnum, let's hypothetically say that they do 3,000 feet per second. That's one metric. That it goes fast, and that's cool to go fast. But if you can't hit what you're aiming at, or it goes fast, but then it's summertime and your bolt doesn't open, or it's well below zero and your powder charge doesn't burn completely, that's a problem. So it's very important to look at all of the aspects of ammunition. And yes, with the 7PRC, we knew the 28 Nosler and the STW and all those others that it was going to beat it down the drag strip. But we want a whole package, a system that works, that has appreciable velocity, that is got the proper twist rate to launch modern bullets, the bullets that we want to shoot today that buck the wind really well, and hold on to velocity. So although we might start with less velocity, these super efficient 7mm bullets, they're holding on to it. So they're carrying it down range. And again, it's very important to look at all aspects, not just the velocity. And what's also nice, I mentioned it at the beginning as well with chronographs. If you're a precision marksman and you've got a 7PRC and you want to use it factory loaded ammo, you're not a hand loader, and your velocity is 50 foot slow, 75 foot slow, whatever it is, we have really good chronographs right now, and we have really good ballistic calculators out there. And if you're trying to shoot an animal within your capabilities, at some non-traditional distances, 400, 500, 600 yards, you'd be surprised what 75 foot per second doesn't do to your external ballistics when you're shooting a really efficient bullet. Yeah,
great. Well, I think that answers a lot of the questions. Obviously, folks are going to make their minds up on this, but having lived through the 60s and 70s and a lot of the controversies over various cartridges and seeing good cartridges fail because these rumors got started, I thought it would be smart to clear the air here and let folks know that Hornady, I don't think, is trying to pull the wool over our eyes on this one. And I would just urge everybody to look hard at the numbers. And it's good to see the answers as to why this is occurring. You guys aren't pulling this on purpose. You're working as diligently as you can, it sounds like, to get the right powders to make this all work. It sounds like you did a pretty good job of engineering this cartridge from the get-go. So once again, everyone's free to load up whatever they want. You guys build 7 Rem Mag ammo as well as 7PRC, so there's not a huge advantage. Yeah. So what difference is it to you what people choose?
Yeah.
So Good to get that information from you, Seth. Is there anything else you think we should know before we sign off here?
No, but I appreciate the opportunity to use your flat platform to clear the air, because it could be a misunderstanding. We're certainly not doing anything purposefully to pull the wool over anyone's eyes, and actually quite the opposite. Again, we understand that people now have access to incredibly accurate chronographs, and there's no reason to be uneducated. We want you to chronograph your rifle and your ammunition. Again, we do think this is a temporary problem, and it will go back to normal eventually. And we're always trying to find new propellant solutions where we don't have to sacrifice accuracy, because that's something we will not compromise. But when you have a lot of propellant that is not on the velocity side that you want it, and then you have a factory-built firearm that has very loose tolerances, let's say, or maybe was chambered on the maximum end, you have a perfect storm to where that scenario is not going to generate the pressure to get the velocity that you want, because your chamber is loose, compounded by that particular lot is running a little bit slow. So it's compounded there. But I appreciate that opportunity to come on here, clear the air a little bit, and know that it is temporary. And the 7PRC is something that I never guessed would be as popular as it is in less than 1 calendar year of manufacture. So that's certainly rewarding to see. And we're trying to get it out there as quickly as we can without sacrificing the accuracy that we demand from our precision rifle cartridge line.
I just thought of something, Seth. You guys are making more loads than just that initial 180 grain. You've got 175 grain for a hunting load.
Yep.
And the CX bullet is in a 160, is it?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Do you have the same powder pressure issues with those two?
Not really. No. Certainly the CX, the 160 grain bullet, that one is using the same temporary powder solution that we found for the 180 grain load. And it has no problem achieving pressure and velocity. And we purposefully kind of spec that one a little bit slower than we maybe needed to, simply because it's a monolithic bullet. And we know, used to a steady diet of monolithic bullets, that you might encounter some fouling problems if you are really shooting a high amount. So we know that one, there's generally not a problem. The 175 is not quite as affected as the 180 grain bullet. And again, sometimes this propellant comes in and it's a non-issue, and it's only some lots that are affected.
How often do you change lots
of powder?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Again, I'm in my former career, I could have told you, removed into the marketeering world for almost 4 years now. I forget the powder's in 44-pound drums, and I'm not sure how many drums per lot that we get, but we load ammo as quickly and efficiently as we can. So we do go through quite a bit of powder.
Well, now all we have to do is get somebody in this country to start manufacturing some powder.
That would be, if we could find, a genie, rub the bottle and create a single-based extruded propellant factory that could turn out infinite amount of high-performance propellant right here in the USA. That would be amazing.
Sounds like a business startup somebody out there could probably grab a hold of.
You know how to make millions starting a new business like that, Ron?
Oh, yeah.
You got to start out as a billionaire.
Hope you like working with red tape.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Seth. Folks, this was Seth Zurk from Hornady. Seth and I actually grew up about probably 100 miles apart. He was in Nebraska. I was up in South Dakota. We never knew each other because I'm way too old.
Right on, Ron.
All right. We'll see you later, Seth. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Well, I want to thank Seth for his honest explanation of what is going on there. Makes perfect sense to me. I don't think Hornady or any other ammunition company is trying to pull the wool over our eyes on any of this stuff. And I said it in one of the videos recorded on a rifle test the other day, a PRC, the 7PRC. I'm going to give you the data on here. We've got a full video coming up on that rifle, as well as the ammo tests we did, so you can watch all of this stuff happen. But as I said in that, it just doesn't make sense for any ammo company to try to push you into one cartridge over another, because they're making ammunition. They're making money selling you 308s and 223s and 7 rem mags, and it doesn't matter if they're latest and greatest. They're They're selling ammo. So whatever you want, you get the demand. They've got the ammo to supply it. They're not going to make more off of one than the other. Well, maybe off of the super magnums, but you get the program. So that was good information about powder availability or inability to get powder. It's just getting to be a mess. But here's what happened with my testing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, years ago, I shot the 7PRC down at the FTW Ranch when it first came out to test it and the rifles, and we were getting the advertised velocities. They were at that time using that Reloader 26 powder that works so well. But what's happened now, if they don't get the powder, they're having trouble pushing it, getting exactly what they want. So I got some new ammunition, 3 different types. I got the 180 grain match load. I got the 175 grain ELDM hunting load, or ELDX hunting load, and the CX load, the all copper bullet at 160 grain. And then I shot them through a Springfield Armory Waypoint 2020 rifle. And when I started shooting, I had some of the old original loads left. 180 grain ELD match bullet. I averaged 3,023 feet per second out of a 24-inch barrel. My first group, 3-shot group, was 1.3 inches. My next one was 0.946 inches, getting better. Then I switched to the 175 grain bullet in their hunting load, and I got a high of 3,003 feet per second, a low of 2969, and an average of 2989. And then I went to the 160 grain EL, or the CX all copper bullet. I got 3,051 for my high, 3,023 for my low, for an average of 3,037. So the group size there was 1.35. I forgot to tell you the group on that 175, it was 1.05, so right about an inch, which is okay, great for hunting, but boy, you should do better with a high-end rifle like that. So I cleaned the barrel quite well and thought I'd give it one more chance. This time I went out, and with that 175 grain bullet, I averaged 3,000 feet per second, and I got a group of 0.416. I like that. Well, then I thought I'd try the 165s. Actually, I tried the 165s first because generally the copper bullets will perform better off of a clean barrel without any gilding metal laid down. So I actually shot that load first. And there I averaged 3,002 feet per second, and my group size was 0.355. Woo! The Waypoint 2020 is shooting, and I recommend you check out that video as soon as we get it out. I do a review of the rifle as well as the ammunition. So I'm getting the numbers, guys. Now, I looked at the lots on the 2 comparison ones. I had the 180 grain ELD match loads, and the lot numbers were the same. So I called Seth back and asked him about it, and he said, yeah, those are the same. You must have gotten a new box of ammunition that was still the original lot that probably had the Reloader 26 powder in it. So I am going to be looking for the latest box with whatever powder in it, and I will run another test on that real quick and let you guys know what's going on there. But I think what I want to emphasize is I wouldn't get too freaked out about whether or not this factory ammo that you're shooting is getting 2,800 versus 3,000. Out of each barrel, we all recognize that the tightness of your chamber, the tightness of your barrel, and all the rest of it can have an effect and easily account for 100 feet per second difference. But 200 feet per second, it's asking a little much. So there, I think it's going to be the powder issue. But again, even if currently they cannot load to the pressures and the velocities that they first advertised, you've still got the cartridge capacity there that's always been there. The same as with the 7-rem mag. You know, the guys just say, well, I'm going to stick with a 7-rem mag. I say, hey, more power to you. I am too. I've got a 7-rem mag. It works just great. I can shoot sub-MOA all day with it. So I really don't need the PRC, but it's fun to have one. It's fun to play around with it. But I'm not getting much more than 2850, 2860 out of my 7-rem mag with these same bullets. And if I want to go to the really high BC ones, I might need to throat a little bit longer to really seat them out far enough to keep my velocities up. So 6 of one, half of the other. Make up your own mind. As I said, Hornady and Nosler and Black Hills Ammunition and Double Tap and Winchester and Remington and Federal and all the rest of them will pretty much sell you anything you want. They're not taking advantage of you. Also remember that a lot of this ammunition production is out of the hands of the ammunition producers. The manufacturers can't produce the product for you if they can't get the raw ingredients. And with all the military actions going around the world and the wars demanding all of this gunpowder and probably brass and bullets and primers, that's what the problem is, guys, largely that. So keep it in mind. Hey, start your morning off right with a cup of coffee out of your Hunt Honest, Shoot Straight cup from Ron Spomer Outdoors. Go to our website, Ron Spomer Outdoors, and you can get branded cups, t-shirts, caps, and other fun stuff. Helps keep us all reminded we should hunt honest and shoot straight throughout the day. Well, it's time for our comment of the week. 3 winners this time. I've forgotten all your names. One was Elk Hunter, one was J Medic, and I can't remember the last one, but you all were commenting on these bogus claims of 300 feet per second or 3,000 feet per second for the PRC that we investigated. So those are the kinds of things we like to do here. We like to get things right, answer questions, dig deep into some of these controversies. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. And our Freedom Bell is one of the sculptures from Doug Adams, who builds the Freedom Bells to celebrate the Second Amendment freedoms, has me shoot groups into the steel base plate, and then he puts his magic touches on these old steel cast-offs. They make a great ring. You can find these at galleries across the West, but also at RonSpomerOutdoors.com website. Somebody who needs a gift that he doesn't really need might benefit from one of these Freedom Bells. Great way to ring in our Second Amendment freedoms. All right. Hey, those are some great questions. I hope we cleared up some of this 7mm PRC confusion. And regardless if you prefer to shoot that or the old 757 Mauser or anything else, I wish you all the best. Hunt honest and shoot straight.